Have you ever wondered if a modern nation like Iran was once named in prophecies thousands of years ago and played a decisive role in the salvation history of the Bible? What if I told you that Iran, the nation we know today, is not only part of the modern political map, but also holds a strategic position in the grand prophetic picture of the Bible? When people think about biblical stories, they often imagine Israel, Egypt, or Babylon, the famous ones. Yet few realize that Iran, known in ancient times as Persia, is mentioned by name in Scripture as a power that would help shape the destiny of God's chosen people. The biblical origin story of Persia begins a long journey, tightly interwoven with the most pivotal events in sacred history, from the descendants of Noah through countless generations to the reign of Cyrus the Great. The history of the Iranian people is inseparable from key moments in the story of Israel. The most astonishing fact is that God chose to use a pagan empire to rescue his people, restore the temple, and fulfill prophecies spoken centuries before they came to pass. To understand this connection, we must travel back to the days right after the Great Flood. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the forefathers of all nations on earth. In the Table of Nations from Genesis 10, one of Japheth's sons is named Madai, the ancestor of the Medes. The Medes later lived alongside and became closely allied with the Persians, together laying the foundation of the great Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most powerful and influential empires in human history. The Medes settled in the land that would become modern-day Iran, while the Persians, emerging from the same region, rose to prominence later. Both groups shared the same Iranian ancestry, and according to the Bible, they are direct descendants of Japheth through Madai. This link places the Iranian people into the biblical narrative from the earliest post-flood history, connecting them to one of the oldest genealogies recorded in Scripture. Centuries later, Persia rose to become a superpower. The alliance of the Medes and Persians, under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, founded the mighty Achaemenid Empire. At its height, this empire stretched from the Indus River to North Africa, covering many of the regions prominently mentioned in the Bible, including Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. However, military might and vast territory are only part of the story. What truly sets Persia apart is how God used them to fulfill his promise to Israel. When Babylon, under King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered Jerusalem in 586 BC, destroying the temple and exiling the people of Judah, the 70 years of captivity prophesied by Jeremiah began to unfold. Then in 539 BC, Cyrus the Great overthrew Babylon, and everything changed. The book of Ezra records that Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Israelites to return home, rebuild Jerusalem, and restore the temple. In Ezra 1 verses 1-4, he declares, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth." A statement that etched Persia's role deep into the history of faith, transforming them from a pagan empire into an instrument in the divine plan. There are moments in history when one cannot help but recognize that everything is unfolding according to a plan far greater than human understanding. One such moment occurred when a foreign ruler, completely outside the covenant people of God, became the key figure in bringing the Israelites back to their homeland. More than 100 years before this man appeared, the prophet Isaiah had recorded something astonishing. God called out a specific name, Cyrus, and described him as my shepherd, the one who would carry out his mission to restore Israel, Isaiah 44 verse 28. In Isaiah 45 verse 1, Cyrus is even addressed as the Lord's anointed, a title usually reserved for Israel's chosen kings. The deeper meaning is clear. If God wills it, he can use anyone, even a ruler who worships foreign gods, to accomplish his divine plan. The rise of Cyrus the Great, who conquered Babylon, was not merely a military triumph. It marked the end of the 70-year exile of the Israelites, just as the prophet Jeremiah had foretold, Jeremiah 25 verses 1-12, 29:10. His royal decree, allowing the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, was far more than a political decision. It was the perfect fulfillment of a divine promise. Under the leadership of Zerubbabel, the restoration of the temple began, opening a new chapter in Israel's history. Yet Persia's role did not end there. Decades later, the book of Esther recounts another dramatic episode in which the Persian Empire once again became the backdrop for God's sovereign intervention. During the reign of King Xerxes I Ahasuerus, a dark plot was conceived by Haman, a powerful court official. The complete extermination of the Jewish people scattered throughout the empire. Fueled by hatred, Haman manipulated the king into issuing a decree of mass execution. But God's providence once again worked through an unlikely figure, Queen Esther. Born a Jewish orphan and raised by her cousin Mordecai, Esther entered the Persian royal court seemingly by chance. Yet Mordecai reminded her with the famous words, "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther 4 verse 14. In a bold and dangerous move, Esther risked her life by entering the throne room uninvited, breaking royal protocol to reveal her true identity and plead for survival of her people. The story reached its climax when the king learned of Haman's treachery and ordered his execution on the very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. A new decree was issued, granting the Jews the right to defend themselves and strike back against their enemies. This event not only saved an entire nation from annihilation, but also inspired the Jewish festival of Purim, celebrated to this day as a reminder of how God protected his people in the most hopeless of circumstances. Looking back, both events, Cyrus' decree to rebuild the temple and Esther's daring intervention, stand as unshakable proof of one eternal truth. God's plan transcends borders, empires, and human authority. He can turn even those outside his covenant into perfect instruments of his will. And Persia, a seemingly distant empire from the God of Israel, twice took center stage in this divine drama. In the intricate flow of human history, there are empires that may seem like mere side characters, yet they play a pivotal role in the grand design of God's plan. Persia is a prime example. Though not part of the covenant people of Israel, they were far from passive observers. Instead, Persia became an active force in safeguarding and preserving the chosen nation, those destined to bring forth the Messiah. The Bible does not merely depict Persia in a historical light. It places them in the very heart of great prophetic visions, where empires rise and fall under the sovereign hand of the Almighty. One of the clearest examples is found in the book of Daniel, a Jewish prophet who lived during the Babylonian exile and served in the courts of both Babylonian and Persian rulers. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of a massive statue made of various materials, each part representing a different world empire. The chest and two arms of silver symbolized the Medo-Persian Empire, the power that would replace Babylon as a dominant force in the ancient world. Even more vivid are the visions in Daniel 7, where four beasts represent four mighty empires to come. The second beast, shaped like a bear raised on one side, stands for the Medo-Persian Empire. That raised posture is more than a visual quirk. It reflects the dual structure of power, a combination of the strength of the Medes and the Persians. Under King Cyrus the Great, this empire expanded so vastly that it forever reshaped the political map of human civilization. The prophecy continues in Daniel 8, where a ram with two horns, one for the Medes and one for the Persians, charges in all directions, conquering vast territories. Yet from the west comes a goat with a prominent horn, representing Greece and its legendary king, Alexander the Great, who would swiftly overthrow the mighty Persian Empire. These visions were not random tales, but markers on God's prophetic timeline. The rise and fall of Persia had been foretold. It was during their reign that the prophecies of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel came to fulfillment. God's people were set free and returned to their homeland. Although the Persian Empire fell to Alexander in the 4th century BC, its influence remained even into the time of the New Testament. By the birth of Jesus, political power had shifted from Greece to Rome, yet the cultural, political, and administrative legacy of Persia still shaped the ancient world. One mysterious thread still connected Persia to the New Testament story: the Magi, the wise men in Matthew 2. Many scholars believe they came from the Persian region, possibly Zoroastrian priests, famed for their knowledge of astrology and interpreting omens. They journeyed across the desert, guided by a strange star, to worship the King of the Jews newly born. This shows that even when Persia's political power was gone, its wisdom and spiritual heritage still contributed to the story of salvation. Furthermore, Persia's tradition of religious tolerance paved the way for the spread of Judaism and later Christianity. For centuries, this openness served as a cultural bridge, ensuring that key prophecies were fulfilled exactly in the time God had appointed. Victory. Throughout human history, there have been empires that not only reshaped the world map, but also left an enduring mark on God's divine plan. The story of Persia, the ancient precursor to modern-day Iran, is one of those epic chapters. Main content. From thousands of years ago, when trade and military routes stretched across the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire stood out with a rare policy for its time, allowing its subjects to preserve their own faith and religious traditions. This tolerance not only ensured internal stability, but also became a catalyst for the flourishing of many communities, particularly the Jewish people, who found in Persia a safe haven to protect their beliefs. In this atmosphere of freedom, the seeds were sown for the later spread of the gospel across vast lands. Today, when we look back, it's impossible to ignore the position of Iran, the heir to this legendary empire, in the light of biblical prophecy. Many scholars and theologians believe that Persia, as it was known in biblical times, will once again step onto the world stage, playing a pivotal role in the final events of human history. In Ezekiel chapters 38 to 39, a striking vision unfolds. A mighty coalition of nations will one day rise against Israel in the last days. Among them is Persia, aligned to Gog of Magog and other allies, engaging in a monumental conflict known as the War of Gog and Magog. This will be no ordinary war, but the ultimate confrontation between darkness and light, between the forces of evil and God's people, with Israel standing at the very heart of the storm. Though the exact timing and details of this prophecy remain debated, the inclusion of Persia in this vision reveals its lasting importance not only in politics, but also in spiritual matters. Likewise, Daniel's prophecies concerning the rise and fall of empires, including Persia, emphasize a timeless truth. God holds supreme authority over all nations. He raises kingdoms in their appointed time, and he brings them down when his divine plan is fulfilled. Looking at the modern-day Middle East, with mounting tensions between Iran and Israel, it's hard not to connect these events to the biblical narrative. What is unfolding now is not merely a matter of politics or territory. It is another chapter in a story that began thousands of years ago, a story that will only conclude when all of God's promises are fulfilled. From the descendants of Japheth through Madai to the era of Cyrus the Great, Persia has left an indelible mark in the Bible. It helped restore Israel, protected the Jewish people in the moving account of Esther, and time and again served as an instrument for God's will. But its role did not end in ancient history. The prophecies of Isaiah, Daniel, and Ezekiel continue to remind us that Persia, modern-day Iran, remains part of God's strategic design, destined to reappear in the monumental events of the end times. Thus, when we view the world today through the lens of Scripture, we see that no empire, no ruler, no matter how powerful, is beyond his control. The story of Persia is living proof that God can use even foreign powers, seemingly distant from his people, to advance his plan of salvation. Persia of the past and Iran of the present still hold a significant position on the global stage. Its deep connection to the Bible reminds us that history is more than the rise and fall of empires. It is a grand unfolding of God's plan for the redemption of humanity, a plan still being written, and one that will culminate in his ultimate,